How's it going, everybody? First of all, thanks a million for watching my last video. I was really delighted with the feedback I got, and people seem to enjoy it. And now don't worry, I'm not going to put out a whole load of videos. Life will get in the way of the best laid plans, as you all know. But because it's Easter weekend, I wanted to talk about the Irish Transport and General Workers Union and their role in the 1916 Rising. I want to just pause and acknowledge the fact that while we celebrate the bravery of those who were involved in moments like the 1916 Rising, I think it's always important not to glamorise war, conflict and violence, because these things always involve suffering and loss, especially for innocent victims who get caught in the crossfire. But at the same time, I think it's really important to honour the valiant people who, in the context of oppression, fought for justice and a better future, and their courage really deserves recognition. Let's recognise those, even if we do bear in mind the heavy cost of such struggles. So I want to talk about the Irish Transport and General Workers Union, which became SIPTU, and its contributions to the 1916 Rising, and also place it in the technological and social context of the time, including the grim living conditions that Irish workers found themselves in, and how ordinary workers may have felt reading the news. Of course, the 1916 Rising wasn't just down to the ITGWU's or the ICA's efforts, but I want to focus on that. So just for people who don't know or have forgotten since they studied this for the Leaving Cert, the Easter Rising happened mainly in Dublin. It was an insurrection predominantly against British rule, and it happened between April 24th, which is my birthday, so Eamon Gilmore and Enda Kenny's birthday, but that's a side point altogether. But it happened between April 24th, 1916 and April 29th, and it was ultimately a turning point in Ireland's history. But if you look at the world around 1916, the world is engulfed by World War I, so there's trench warfare, millions dead, empires clashing, and Ireland was a small nation under British rule, and the war split opinions. So some Irish men are fighting for Britain, some forced into it because of economic conditions, and some see it as a chance to push for independence after the war. Technology is moving fast, telegraph zip. You have early aeroplanes buzzing about and factories churning out war machines. And the ITGWU was forward thinking in this regard. So if you look back, you'll see that one of their first letterheads actually had a picture of an aeroplane at the top of the letter. And I suppose that'd be a bit like a union today, maybe having a quantum computer or some kind of artificial intelligence at the top of their letterhead. So these workers, they weren't just striking for wages or fighting for nationalism, but they were eyeing a future where workers could embrace progress. So life in cities like Dublin, like Cork, like Belfast was often very tough for ordinary workers. Amongst Dublin's working class, tenement housing was the norm. So that was when families were squashed into cramped living conditions, single rooms, often without running water or sanitation. Cork's docklands were similarly grim, and in Belfast, in the linen mills or the shipyards, you may have been lucky enough to get steady work, but steady work with brutal conditions such as long hours, dangerous machinery, and wages barely covering the rent. So for the average worker reading newspapers, sometimes edited by the likes of Connolly and Larkin, there must have been a mixture of anger and hope. So headlines about the lockout or rising food prices and slum conditions must have hit really hard, but at the same time, stories of union victories, global struggles, changes to technology must have given a little bit of hope and sparked the idea of change. So you can imagine a Dublin tram driver scanning reports of Liberty Hall's defiance and looking at things happening around the world, like in the United States or even in Russia, and thinking to themselves, maybe we can shift things. So the Irish Transport and General Workers Union, it's founded in 1909 by Jim Larkin, to tackle the injustices working people faced. And of course the 1913 lockout happens, which a lot of us would have learnt about in school. It wasn't the only big industrial strife that happened, but one of the ones we remember. And the 1913 lockout radicalised many people. People like Countess Markievicz, who first got involved in the union in the basement of Liberty Hall, preparing soup and giving out soup to families impacted by the 1913 lockout. And likewise, the Irish Citizens Army, which ended up fighting in 1916, gets set up during the 1913 lockout to defend workers against the likes of the police, the Dublin Metropolitan Police, or strike breakers who were attacking workers in dispute. And by 1916, the Citizens Army is a relatively disciplined militia ready to fight for workers' rights and a new Ireland. So, in terms of the Rising itself, Liberty Hall was the Rising's heart. The British press called it the rebel headquarters, and they weren't wrong. A banner outside Liberty Hall proclaimed that we serve neither king nor Kaiser but Ireland, rejecting the World War I and British rule. And inside, the Proclamation of the Irish Republic was written and printed by trade union Labour. And it's often pointed to now as still a really, really progressive document. Things in it such as, treating all the children of the nation equally is progressive language. And of course, the Rising itself, it's a coalition effort. So you have the involvement of various groups like the Irish Volunteers. But as I say, I'm focusing for this video on the ITGWU and the Irish Citizens Army. So on Easter Monday, Connolly led from the General Post Office, the Rising's hub. The ICA's Michael Mallon was in charge in Stephen's Green with Countess Markievicz as the second in command. And many people point out the fact that Stephen's Green was a bit of a tactical nightmare because you had, a big open space surrounded by tall buildings. Not ideal when you're fighting a very well-armed army. At the time, the press absolutely vilified the rebels, vilified Liberty Hall. But for workers, I think this became a symbol of possibility, better lives, better wages, and a say in your own country. And the Rising ended after 6 days. Connolly, the union's leader, wounded, was executed, tied, injured to a chair. Countess Markievicz, for example, was also sentenced to death, but avoided the death penalty in the end due to her gender and potentially her class. So the ITGWU, which is now SIPTU, I think it showed how unions drive for change, even in these most extreme circumstances. They fought for a society where workers had a voice. It wasn't just a revolution for revolution's sake. These people had a political vision of what the future should look like. And the Proclamation of the Republic, written and printed in Liberty Hall, outlined what that could look like and remains a call for fairness. So, as I said, of course, this isn't the full story. I've left out plenty of different people like Margaret Skinner, for example, who definitely deserve mention, but I don't have time to put it all into this short video. But do check out the various podcasts about the 1916 Rising, as I say, from the likes of Liz Gillis, Donald Fallon, Lorcan Collins, books by the likes of Pádraig Yeates, Devine. There's so many good resources out there where you can delve into the finer details. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Have a very, very happy Easter, and thanks a million for watching.